welcome. My name is Jon. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict. It's great to be here with you today. Today's topic is pause. So if you've ever heard these words, chill, hey, chill, bro. How about uh, calm down or breathe, or people around you are heavy breathing like this. That might be a sign that you actually need to pause, but any of those words actually has never helped anybody take a pause. That's my experience. You might have a different experience, but whenever I've told anybody to chill out, there was no chilling out. When somebody told me to chill out, I've never actually chilled out. I actually got more unchill, and so I think the point of this is that if we're going to um, come out of a life of addiction, there's a new way of living, which is called the spiritual life, a spiritual basis. So you might have heard the other word called pause as well. It's PAWS. And so that is post-acute withdrawal symptoms. And so if you have come from a life of addiction, you are used to a life of chugging. More chug, me, insecurities, self-consciousness, like it's all about me. Self-pity, selfish, self-centeredness, what can I get? And so most of us in addiction have lived that way. It is all about us. Even our giving is about us. It's actually, what can I get out of this as I give it? Am I getting hits of adrenaline? Am I forming unhealthy relationships? Am I trauma bonding? Am I, have these codependent relationships and a whole bunch of them? It's still getting something out of it. So we are chugging life. We're not giving into the stream of life. So another acronym for pause would be pause, avoid unnecessary speech, postpone action until serenity enters. How about that for an acronym? Postpone action until serenity enters. And so if you are somebody coming from a life of chugging, and then you have this way of living with substances or chemicals inside of you, drinking, pornography, food, codependency, any of those things, then your whole brain has been wired to need those things for a sense of ease and comfort, for peace and serenity, for you to actually calm down. So pausing is a whole different concept of, it's still relational. It's still causing me to seek ease and comfort and peace. And it's just a different direction. So instead of going to the substances or the relationships or the adrenaline or whatever it is, whatever channel it is, your phone, they're designed to actually keep you in pause mode. A phone is actually designed to hold you, to hold your attention. So whatever is holding you, whatever is keeping you, will start to shape and mold you. And so that's how somebody becomes alcoholic. They are shaped and molded due to a physical and mental dependency on it, an abnormality of the body that produces a craving for more. And fill in the blank, whether that's screen time, pornography, eating, codependency, whatever that is, it's just you can't get enough of it. I keep getting more thirsty. And then when I say I'm never going to do it again, because stopping is not the hard part for any of us. We love stopping. We're professional stoppers, but we continue to go. We're not good at quitting. We're good at stopping and restarting. So that's a mental part, and then the physical abnormality, which is what I'm a slave to. So I'm a slave to these things that actually hold my attention, that cause me to pause, that give me timeouts. That's what I go to for those timeouts. And over the course of months or years or decades, then I'm actually a slave to it. And so that's kind of uh, uh, an entry point to a diagnosis or a qualification is, do I have an addiction? So when I start, I can't stop effectively. And when I don't want to do it, I do it again at some point. I can't stay stopped. And so if that is the qualification, then the problem is power. You lack power. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the Bible for dummies, if you will, it says lack of power was our dilemma. We had to find a power which we could to solve our problem. That's exactly what this process is about. That's what the 12 steps are about, is to actually find the power of God in your life rather than the power of other things in your life. Um, so so we can understand that on a mental note, and then we have a process of going like, okay, well, I just can't be fueled by the spirit of alcohol or the spirit of drugs or the spirit of addiction, whatever that looks like in your context. But I need to be fueled by the spirit of the power of God, the power of love. So we go through this process, really identifying what's driving me. Why am I a slave? How did I get involved in this stuff? So we look at our wounding underneath, our spiritual disconnect, and I really believe we all come out of the womb disconnected. You actually disconnect from your mom, practically, but we are born in a world that is that we spiritually are disconnected from the love of God. And so recovery actually means recovering the Garden of Eden, the hand in hand walk in the garden with the Father, where all of our needs are met. We are protected and cared for and nurtured, and we live with the Spirit of God. And that's what the gospel is all about. We are the Spirit of God's temple. We get to be the temple of God. So that's what we get to recover. And just like the garden, the snake came in as the tempter, and that's really what we look at as the enemy, and why I need to be paused, why I need a break from, because we have all of this stuff inside of us. The process of recovery is actually clearing out the temple, a process of taking inventory and looking at reaping and sowing, of making amends to the world around me. But I have to look at the true nature of who Jon Ruby is. At the core of Jon Ruby, what's his true nature? And do I find that objectionable? And then I get to see the harms that I've done to the world around me. And I go through this amends process, kind of like reaping and sowing the spirit of the fruit of God, sowing peace and forgiveness and love, and out of that comes joy and contentment and purpose and meaning and definition to my life that was so confusing before. And so when we look at the true enemy in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about fear being a corrosive red thread shot through the fabric of our very existence that sets us in trains of motion. And so can I start to look at fear as not an emotion, but as the enemy? Because even in the Word of God, in the Bible, it says God's perfect love casts out fear. And so I don't think we're supposed to be void of emotion, but we're supposed to be void of the enemy, which fear is the slave driver that sets me in motion. So I've come into consent with fear through my childhood, through the things that have happened with me, and I've made promises and agreements and vows because of those experiences. And so now I'm actually a slave to fear. So I have to get to the fear and ask God to rid me of that, so that I'm actually free of fear and full of his love. So there's kind of like a transition that I actually get to come out of consent of the enemy, which is fear, and come into consent with God's love, and God's power is going to remove those things. So now I am entering into a new relationship and a new way of living, which we call the spiritual life. The old life was all about the physical and the practical and the climbing the corporate ladder and making money and getting what I need out of life, taking the vacations and the holidays, and my life centered around me. And now, to solve this addiction problem, we're being invited into being the temple of God through a process of transaction of his love, casting out fear. And now I become an agent of his light and love to the world around me. And now I have a greater purpose. I get to live this spiritual life. So one of the hardest parts, and this talk is directed at me, because if you know me at all, you would say that's a high energy young man. He's very capable and competent. He's a problem solver. He's a builder. He wears 10 hats. And then you would say, well, how does he do that all? And maybe you don't see me like that. Maybe you don't know me like that. But I'm involved in a lot of things. And as a kid, I always had trouble sitting. I always had trouble eating dinner at the table. But like I was just like, I need to get this over with. You do not want little John Ruby in a gift shop. I have to touch everything. I have to see. I'm a very active young man, as a boy and even as an adult. And I have a lot of energy and I hit the ground running in the morning at 5:30. So this concept is for people like me especially, because as we all live the spiritual life, the new life, I have to learn how to stay connected to the power of God in a way that is going to nurture and care for me on the inside. So Vicky was instrumental in me really seeing this in the recovery literature of Alcoholics Anonymous is as we get into further in the steps, we clear out the temple, we're starting to make amends, and we're starting to live this new life of prayer, meditation, connecting to God. One of the promises is it says, if we stay close to God and do his work well, he'll give us everything we need. That can be tricky. Coming from the old life and walking into that promise of like, he's going to supply all of my needs if I stay close to him. Well, I get to be close to him through the process of recovery. If you've done the 12 steps or Big Book Awakening or LifeLab Express or LifeLab Full, then that was a process that you actually get to be in this relationship, personal relationship, just like maybe you had with alcohol. That was a personal relationship. I felt it. I felt alcohol every time I drank. And now I have to have that same, for me, I have to have that same depth of relationship with God that I had with alcohol. Like I have to feel it. I can't fake it. I can't be like, I hope it's true. Oh, I had this little experience once, like a butterfly landed on my forehead, and I just felt the full nature of creation and the creator. And I was like filled with tears. And yeah, I believe God exists. No, I have to feel God every day. Like I have to actually feel the power of God inside of me on a daily basis. And that's the promise of recovery, is that I get to recover that hand-in-hand communication with God as they had in the garden. Every day might not be like a hand-in-hand day of like just sitting with dad and asking questions. And like actually dad didn't live in the garden, he was in the garden, and I think he came in and out of it. That's my experience too, where like not every day is a hand-in-hand day with God, but there's always a connection time. So as we start to develop this spiritual way of living and start to adhere to different principles, as in it's better to give than to receive. Love and tolerance is our code. Living the message. I actually get to live the message of the gospel to the world around me. I actually have to live it. I have to know it. I have to be able to breathe it. I have to be inspired by it to bring this message to anybody that God brings in my path on a daily basis. And it starts to change my purpose and definition of my life, of what I find valuable. And I love to reach out to the newcomer, and I love to be able to connect to people that are drowning in addiction and don't want to do it anymore, and they're willing to do anything to get out of it. And I've seen over the last 18 years hundreds of people be set free from addiction that was going to. I've seen people like literally come in as I start working with them, and they look like skeletons, and their faces are withdrawn and they can't think properly. And to see them 3 months, 6 months, 2 years later, it's like it's a miracle. Like God is still raising people from the dead. And that could be emotional and spiritual death. I understand that, but I've seen people walking dead and they have been raised back to life and are have a whole new sense of purpose and meaning and definition to their lives. So as we start to enter the spiritual way of living, we do that through the continual process of righting my wrongs and having God's love in me and His forgiveness in me, and me seeing the weight of that, and then being able to operate in that on a daily basis. We have a process for that. Maybe more in step 10 of just kind of watching and praying and being an agent and a representation of God as a full-time job. And then as I go and start to continue to build on this relationship, um, it actually says as we go through the day, there's instructions for us in step 11. As we go through our day, we pause. And I know I'm not reading it. I'm reading it like I understand it now, but before I would read this, as we go through our day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. There's actually two thoughts there because there's a comma after pause. So it actually is saying as we go through the day, we pause. So as I'm going through the day, am I pausing like I look at my phone? Okay, look at your phone after I'm done talking and see how many times you've unlocked it. Because it'll tell you, it likes to tell you that kind of thing just to give you some guilt and shame. Have I paused that many times in what I'm going to suggest how we pause? And then when we're agitated or doubtful, we ask for the right thought or action. We're constantly reminding ourselves that we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times a day, thy will be done, not mine. We are then in much less danger of excitement. That's an interesting thing. So even sober, we can get in danger, and the danger is the dramatic life. That's what it's suggesting, is that's what's going to cause us to start doing God's job, running the show. Well, much less danger of excitement. Fear is another one. Anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire easily. So being fueled by God and His Spirit, we don't tire easily, because the things that tire us are the things that we're pausing away from. So maybe you can hear your own voice and just tell yourself to chill. And maybe you can do that without being in a circumstance that requires that. I remember parenting when the kids were young. I still parent. They're just older, different. And I remember them going at each other, and I'm like, all I have to be is smarter than a grade 3. All I have to, like, that shouldn't be hard. It's way harder than you think, especially when you're alone, especially when they've been doing this for like 2 days straight and you're on summer holidays. And it's like, I just have to be smarter than them. Like, that doesn't, like, they don't even know how to play chess. Like, how can I not be smarter than them right now? And what I've come down to is like, Jon Ruby, you need a timeout. And then I would just go, guys, I'm taking a timeout. I'm going to my bedroom, and I'll be back in a bit when I can think properly. And hopefully they didn't come in and bug me more, but I could just, like, I need a timeout. So we're not suggesting that every timeout or pause starts with a critical situation. This is something that I have to nurture on a daily basis. Just like checking my phone, I check in with the Spirit of God. I take deep breaths. I do prayer and meditation. When I was researching pausing, and I've been doing this for a little while, because the Bible talks about prayer and fasting. And I think most of us can understand the idea of prayer. I want to really develop my thought life into a prayer life as well. So I'm constantly praying. I think intermittent fasting can count as fasting because you're actually pausing your body. So do we do these things, and why are we doing them? Well, so that I'm not operating in the things that tire me out. I'm not being taken by excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, and foolish decisions. So if I look at a car, and I heard this interview with a pastor, he was doing research on this topic. And so he decided he would talk to people that go fast, because we're here to run a race, and we have a purpose and mission on that race. And most of us think it's a marathon, and some of us like to sprint. And so what is this race? How do we win the race? How do we go fast? Because races should be fast. The fastest person usually wins. And so we're actually not racing against anybody. We're not comparing ourselves. This is our own personal race fueled by the Spirit of God. And the more Spirit of God that I have, the faster that I can go, I think. That's the point. And so more of God and less of me wins the race. And so what he interviewed was it was a Indy race car driver. And he said, "What's the key to going fast?" And he goes, "Braking." And he thought that was very curious. And so as a race car driver, the best drivers know how to brake properly going in and out of turns. Imagine you were like some of us that don't like to brake and pause. So you're going 290 kilometers an hour around corners, and we're in this race. And I believe that most of us do this sober. We don't know how to pause or how to brake. So we're just going like as fast as we can. We're full of excitement. We're full of fear, worry, self-pity, and making foolish decisions. And we're drained and exhausted and tired and overwhelmed. I believe if we're living the spiritual life, then that is caused by not pausing. It would be no different than a race car driver that keeps going off the track. His coach would say, "You're not braking properly. Like, you went into that corner hard because you wanted to get around that guy and you didn't brake properly. You're not pausing. You're trying to get at it." And I think humility has to say to me is like, I need to pause. I think I need to pause more than the average person. The mental obsession says, "Oh, you are a normal person. You can do that like a normal person." And I believe that in this battle of the mind that we convince ourselves that we are normal people, whatever even that means. But if we're living the spiritual life, I have to pause unlike normal people. And then if we're comparing recovery people, which we're not supposed to compare, we're supposed to be instructed. So the instruction says pause throughout the day. Am I? Am I taking time outs? Am I postponing action until serenity enters? Or am I just like going throughout the day, living a spiritual life, but not really spiritually connected and just hoping for the best? Because a lot of the days that actually works out at some level, but over the course of time, I will guarantee that there will be a storm in your life or people in your life or situations that happen that will cause you a lot of hurt and pain and maybe using because you haven't been pausing and building your spiritual strength because of pride. Because, well, yesterday I did pretty good. So this race is a continual thing of prayer meditation. Part of that strengthening is pausing. So the outcome is a relationship with God that will solve all of my problems, and we don't tire easy. So just ask yourself these questions. Am I pausing as much as I'm looking at my phone? And maybe that's not even a realistic number, but am I pausing in number of as many people as I message on my text messaging or Facebook Messenger? Am I pausing 5-10 times a day and just seeking, God's voice and asking questions and just pausing before I go into the gift shop and I have to touch everything? Like, just take a deep breath, take a pause, break, do prayer and meditation throughout the day. And I believe that when the storms come, the big ones, then you'll be strong enough spiritually to withstand them. And that takes practice on a daily basis. So we are race car drivers. We are in a race. Maybe you don't relate to the race car. Maybe you relate to a sprinter or a marathon runner, but a race is a race. And so it's a progression of getting stronger, using my energy for a purpose. And I just really encourage us this year to really pause. Like, what does that mean for me on a daily basis? Not just morning and evening, but throughout the day.